The goal of this podcast is to help you break in and thrive in advertising. And this week we have a special one for you. He's the Chief Creative Officer at the Flowershop. And no, he did not bail out of the industry to start selling flowers. At the Flowershop, they're creating work that people will love and work that benefits the brands they work on. And as we always talk about and hear from our guests, the path into the advertising agency world is almost never linear. And Al is a great example of that. He got his first creative job at the age of 28 after many failed attempts he maps out in the episode, including a stint as a mail courier in London. And notably, the first piece of work that he got his hands on at an agency was the agency's Christmas card, which could be something many of us would overlook. But he and I talk about how important it is to take the small things seriously and how they can be the snowballs at the top of the mountain for your career. And on behalf of the Braving and Entering team, thanks for taking some time out of your day to smell the flowers with us. That's enough for me. On to our guest. He's a multi-award winning creative of some of the most recognizable campaigns for Adidas and Nike, Al Mary. And I'm your accomplice, Cooper Colvig. Kick it, Mikey. All right. Good morning, Al. Welcome to the Breaking and Entering podcast. It is a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be talking to you this fine morning. How are you doing?
Great. I'm in Chicago for our listeners. Al, where are you today?
I am 53 miles north of New York City in the burbs, in a shed in my garden. I would have gone into the flower shop this morning, but it will be chaos in there and I will be distracted. So I decided to take this from home and I'll probably go into the city after.
That'll be the same for me before I go into the office. That's awesome. Well, before we get into Flowershop, let's start with you. And as our listeners know, we're always going to start off with your breaking and entering story. And I think that's one of the best parts about the industry is that most of them aren't linear and they're usually pretty wacky or different. I know yours is right in line with that. So let's start there.
Great. Yeah. I mean, I think, it wasn't so much breaking and entering as kind of like repeatedly knocking and stumbling in through the door after a long time of trying. And it is, it took me forever, and I will try to make a kind of long story short, but I didn't go to ad school. I never did an internship. I didn't really have a partner. I barely got into any courses. I found advertising by mistake, and really fell in love with it, and then really struggled to actually convert that love into a job for many years. But maybe I'll step back a little bit, and it really kind of at college. I remember someone wandering into a lecture one morning, waving this kind of booklet. It was an application form for M&C Saatchi, I think. And in the booklet, there was just like 5 questions. I think one of the questions was, what would you have written on your gravestone? And another question was, you had 30 seconds to chat up a celebrity. What would you say? Another question was like, how long is a piece of string? And all you did was like write in the answers in the booklet and send it in. And I thought, well, that sounds fun. And I enjoyed that. And it wasn't like, these other application forms, which were, if James leaves the station at 3 p.m., traveling at 4 miles an hour, and it wasn't like those kind of logical things that seemed like work and boring. It just seemed like fun. And I was like, okay, I filled in a bunch of those because I had no idea, there were all these acronyms, TBWA and AMV and all these things. I had, no idea, but they all seemed to be in the same kind of vein, looking for kind of fun answers. And I sent a bunch in and sent them around to London, not really knowing what the job was, which in retrospect, I probably could have done a little bit more research into what I was getting into. But I went down to London and had some interviews at these big ad agencies, M&C Saatchi, BBH, TBWA. And those places blew my mind. I'm from the east coast of Scotland, a very working class town. The only office I'd ever been in before was my dad's, and it's like a solicitor's firm. And it was, just really, no offense, Dad, but really kind of gray and straight. And these places in London were like, it was when having like a pool table and foosball table was kind of bar was kind of cool. And to me, it was like, oh my God, these places are amazing. There's people with their feet up on the desks, just drawing. Everybody's wearing like casual clothes. It just seemed to me like a really fun place. It didn't seem like work. And so I actually got a job as a graduate trainee at TBWA in 2000. Again, not really knowing what I was getting myself in for. And I was hugely, at the time I was like, I'm a graduate. This is a graduate trainee program. This seems absolutely right. And, I'm not from a creative family. I'm from a very loving family, but there's not a creative bone in anyone. We were never introduced to anything creative growing up. So I was completely like, I didn't even know that really existed, that you could like this. I mean, obviously you knew that people wrote commercials, but it wasn't anything I was ever exposed to, any kind of creative art. I was good at art at school, but that was for the weekend. That was a hobby. Work was work, something you endured. So I was like in this place, and I realized pretty early on that I was going to be a terrible account manager and a terrible planner. But there was the third floor was the creative floor at TBWA in the early 2000s. And this place, I didn't know at the time, was like a who's who of advertising creatives. Trevor Beatty was the kind of overlord there. He had done like just some amazing work for FC UK and Pretty Polly, really a kind of iconic British advertising in there. And that floor was, I mean, Ben Priest was a creative there who founded Adam and Eve. Chris and John were there who like pound for pound, probably the best creative team that I've still kind of ever seen. They did all the Paralympic stuff for Channel 4. They did Skoda Cake. They did John Smith. They just did so much good work. There was Nigel and Paul, who probably won like 3 million D&AD pencils. Nigel Roberts was just an insane copywriter. And anyone who's listening to this should check out his website, actually. Just Google Nigel Roberts copywriter. It's a kind of how to write. But, Paul Silburn was there, sadly no longer with us, but just like probably the best writer of his generation. Danny Brooke Taylor, who founded Lucky Generals, was there. This was all on the creative floor. And that was a place you just didn't walk into unless you had a good reason. And everyone took it so seriously. And every little part of it was, it was the craft was unbelievable. And the ideas that were coming out of that time, I just loved. There was that kind of John Smith's No Nonsense. PlayStation Double Life had just been written, and Ed and James were there, and they presented it on a scroll to Trevor Beatty, and there was all these kind of stories going on about how all this great work was being made. And Thomas Cook, the British travel agents, did this campaign about it's time to leave the country. And I was just like, oh, that's so cool. It's telling all the, the bad reasons about why, people should leave the UK. And it was just all these simple, creative ideas that were coming out. We were doing wild bits of work for the Labour Party. Trevor was really into that. And it was just, it was crazy, some of the stuff that they were doing. Even internally, I can remember Saatchi and Saatchi down the road were having their reception redone. And overnight, Trevor and some of the team went down to the Saatchi and Saatchi reception, where it was like kind of all boarded up. And they put a big poster up saying, you'll get a better reception at TBWA, with an arrow up the street to TBWA. You could Google that as well, all right? I'll give you the link to that. It was just people were just having like real fun being creative. And I was just swept away by that and really wanted to be part of it. And so I did actually ask Trevor, I was like, look, I'm a terrible account person. Could I become a creative? Can I join this department? And he was like, absolutely not. No, who do you think you are? You have to go and study. You have to go to college. You have to go, these people don't just walk in here. So I kind of was pretty humbled and left TBWA. And then I started just doing putting my book together. I applied to Watford. I didn't get in. Applied to a D&AD course, didn't get in. I got help from people at TBWA to try and put together a book. But after a couple of years, I felt like I had it in me, but I just couldn't convert it. I couldn't articulate what I was thinking very well. And in the end, after a couple of years on the road of I did get onto some D&AD courses and got my book together and got so much help from people actually from that department, who I still keep in touch with now. But they really helped me. And I actually ended up almost giving up after about 2 or 3 years trying to put the book together. I actually came back to TBWA and they said, look, I think they took pity on me. They're like, we'll give you a job. And if any kind of like creative stuff comes in, you can have a go at that kind of low stakes creative stuff. And I was like, great. The first bit of work I ever did was the TBWA agency Christmas card. I got a brief to do. They were like, okay, look, I'll go and do, because in those days, like sending Christmas cards to clients from a creative agency was a pretty creative endeavor, but nobody obviously wanted to do it in the creative department. But I was like, give it to me. I'm going to do the best Christmas card you've ever seen. And I did this. I had this idea about doing like digital, which was at the time, kind of advanced digital Christmas tree where a client could buy a bauble on the tree. And if they bought the bauble, it would light up and they could put a message to TBWA in there. So that's my first piece of work. And I loved it. I put everything into it. I was like, this is the brief of a lifetime for me, the Christmas card. And I was really pleased with myself. And that was just obviously it was like a little fun thing looking back on it. But at the time I made it and, I worked with production and I kind of did it all, designed it and wrote it all up. And so it was like my first taste of actually making something. And then my first real break actually came in a couple of years, maybe a year later, actually, at BBH. A guy who I'd worked with, David Murray, who's a big strategy officer at AMV now. He was kind of same age as me, and he went to BBH and said, look, there's this guy called Mark Boyd. He's come in here. He's starting a content department. It's like a digital department. And that was at the time BBH was really traditional, really amazing, but brilliant at TV and print. And Mark Boyd started this non-traditional arm, which was at the time, it was like, okay, well, maybe a client wants to do some publishing or a client wants to do some long form content or a client wants to do a partnership with a TV show. He came in and facilitated all that. And he was looking for people to help him with that. And that basically, I remember doing a CV for him and I wrote it on this huge bit of paper. And it was just like it was like a timeline of my life. And I drew pictures and just handed it in this like huge, big kind of roll up folder and gave it to him. And it was all like just drawings and like just, and he really liked it. And I'm really pleased I did that this didn't send an old CV. And I showed a little bit of, I guess my creativity in there. And he gave me a shot. And then you can imagine what happened. It was like 2008, 2009, that suddenly all these clients wanted non-traditional ideas. And digital was exploding and I was just in the right place. And I started just taking those briefs and coming up with ideas. Mark actually wanted us to go out and pitch to production companies and get screenwriters to write them, people who were in shows to actually come up with the ideas, or people who were in publishing to kind of come up with like articles. But I actually I never went to those people. I just did it myself. And he kind of like humored me, I think. And then I just started making things and it was really interesting because my portfolio became quite non-traditional. And it was only later that I started doing traditional kind of TV and print, but that's how I really got in. So, it was like 2000 to 2006, 7. It took like 6 or 7 years for me to eventually get in.
Well, it's definitely not the traditional way of getting in, of going to an ad school, going to a portfolio school, and then landing your dream job right out the gates. But honestly, that rarely happens. I don't hear that very often. Even for myself, it's taken me a long time to get where I wanted to go within the industry. But there's one thing that I was hearing that was like through everything that you're saying, and something that I've heard a few times before, is that as you're desperately trying to break in or doing whatever you can, or you do get a small little break here, it's not going to be for what you kind of thought it was. You're not going to get to start writing the TV spot. You're not going to get to start creating the epic video, or honestly, even like the billboard that you would see when you're driving down the road. For you, it was the Christmas card, and being able to take something as small, which even as you mentioned back then, it wasn't as small as maybe it would be now, as a Christmas card, that importantly, and to take it that seriously. So how did, that attitude kind of get you through that point to where, as you mentioned, you kind of had your break, BBH took a chance on you, and you started to get actual reps?
Yeah. And I'll tell you about that. But I do want to say, actually, you just reminded me, the reason I wanted to do this, like you said, I didn't come in through a normal route, and I had no idea how to get in. And I think, as you said rightly, there's a myriad of ways that you can get in. And I want to say that I love what you do here, and I think that what this breaking and entering thing is so good, not just for people that know that they want to get in and are trying to figure out how to get in, but for people like me, I think, who didn't even realize that this was a kind of job you could do. So I think that I love that, and I want to be, helpful and help people and give them ideas and tips and all that kind of stuff. But I do want to just say that I think what you're doing is brilliant, not just for the people that know they want to get into advertising, but for the people that just maybe didn't even know it existed as an opportunity to be creative with their lives. And I think you're helping them you're helping them maybe even, have a better, more fulfilled working life. So kudos to you for doing this. And I hope I can, just add some kind of help as well. But to your point about like doing the most with what you get, I'd actually before I wanted to get into advertising, I wanted to be an athlete, and there was a couple of sports that I was good at, but I did it, I failed, by the time I was like 13, 14, 15, it was kind of over. I did come to college to play sport over here, but by that time it was over. And so I kind of got a taste of failure pretty early. I really wanted to be a tennis player, and I wasn't good enough. I didn't have it. And then I really wanted to be a soccer player, and I was good, but I just wasn't good enough. And I got, tried to get into advertising and in the creative side, and I thought I was good, but I just wasn't good enough. And so the failures were kind of stacking up. And so when I did get the opportunity, there was just no way that I was going to not succeed. I was kind of like, it felt like all or nothing to me. So when I got the Christmas card brief, feels funny talking about it, but when I got the Christmas card brief, I took it as seriously as I take a Super Bowl spot now. And that was, I took everything so seriously. I felt like I had to work harder than everyone else. I felt like I wasn't as good as everyone else because I'd experienced this kind of failure. So I kind of had to get up earlier, work harder, stay later. For the first, my first 10 years, I wouldn't really go to agency parties. I generally wouldn't go to award shows. I always thought people were taking a week off to go to the award show. I was like, okay, great. I'm going to steal a march from these people. They're away for a week. I'm going to be working hard for a week. And I didn't care what I got or what the brief was. I really just didn't. And I still don't, honestly, today. If I like it, if I feel passionate about it, it doesn't matter the size or the scale, whether it's out at home, whether it's just a small social thing, whatever. I think it, if you can show that you can take care and deliver on the smallest things, those small things will get bigger and bigger and bigger, because it really is. It's like you have to apply the same rigor to everything you do. And I think that's in you if you have it. And it was in me, partly because of the amount of failure I'd experienced.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's such a good outlook to have on the work, because it comes in so many different ways, and you never know what door it will lead to. Even just making a kick-ass Christmas card, you'd be like, oh, well, I'm not going to get recognition for this. I'm not going to go win Cannes with a Christmas card, but like, that's not always what it's about. Right. And I think being able to feel that passion and point it at things that are meaningful, which at the time, like going that extra length with the client, those have just come to life in different ways today, can be just as meaningful.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that it's a privilege to be able to use your imagination every day and get paid for it. And I'm really grateful and surprised that I've been able to do that. And so I don't take it for granted. I think that I love this industry. I love the fact that we get to wake up every morning and think and come up with ideas and be paid for that. And I think that, having your eye on the prize, having your eye on the distractions is just taking away your energy for the thing that matters, which is the actual work. And it's part of the reason that we started the Flower Shop, because we wanted to get back to just the action of coming up with work and ideas and not having distractions and not having all the superfluous stuff that kind of gets in the way of the simplicity of advertising, which is actually at its core a pretty straightforward profession. But to your point, I don't know where the Flower Shop's going to go. I'm not looking 10 years into the future on this. I'm not looking 5 years into the future. I'm looking like, how do we do good work for our clients this week and next week, and focus on, like, as I was saying, it's just always been on that. I think that if you focus on that and getting as good as you can get, then everything else will take care of itself.
I completely agree. And I'm really glad you bring that up. Because you and I talked about this in the past conversation, but you've mentioned how taking even the smallest things seriously is so important, and what you can get out of it is huge. How, in doing that, are you still able to keep it fun and then keep it simple, particularly in this world where there are so many new shiny objects all over the place, and it can be so easy to lose focus on what we're actually like here to do?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that I do think it's really simple what we do. We basically take a product or a brand, and we get people to think about that brand and a product in a way that they haven't done before. We just reframe the way they think about it, and that reframing is interesting, and it adds value, and people are refreshed by seeing things positioned in a different way. And that really is simply what we focus on. That is what we do. That's all we try to do. We try to keep that as simple as it can be, and it's fun to do it. I enjoy doing it. I enjoy thinking about things in a way that people don't normally think about them, and then like presenting that as a way of thinking about a product or a brand to a client. It's that kind of like, oh, I never. It's why you read a book. It's like, oh, I thought that, but I could never quite articulate it, and this person's articulating it in a way that really resonates with me. And that, at its core, for me, is what we do. And I feel like I've been, over the years, conceptually trained to do that. And when you come up with that stuff, when you think in things in that way, I feel fulfilled about it. I feel like I enjoy it. I like coming in with different angles on things. And I think if we keep it as simple as that, that's where our worth is. That's as creatives and as strategists and as an entire industry. We're just kind of getting people to think a little bit differently about brands, and we're really well placed to do it, I think. And I think when you do that, if you enjoy doing that, it's fun. Where the fun kind of is sucked out of it, or in all the distractions, all the meaningless kind of work for work's sake, the overthinking, the different agendas. And that's why we try, when we're doing the flower shop, we're trying to keep it just to the right number of people that it takes to make the decision and get the work through. And that's really, if we can keep it simple and keep it tight and keep it pretty lean, then I think you're just doing the stuff you like, which is enjoyable.
Totally. And it's awesome to hear that that's what you guys are working to do. And I think you're right. And something that really interests me in all this is that I was someone like you. I had no fucking clue what I was going to do. My dad was a doctor, knew I wasn't going to do that. And the other side of my family runs a summer camp, which is great, but it wasn't going to pay the bills. And we'll always have that as a part of my life. And as soon as I found and heard, I knew that I didn't want to wear a suit going to work. I didn't want to be uptight. But as soon as I found that this world of advertising and how cool it was, and as you mentioned, people with their feet up, drying everywhere, how it can kind of be a merry pirate ship at points.
Mm-hmm.
It does bring an immense business value in gaining mental availability with your audiences and getting people to think about brands in new and exciting ways. And that can sometimes get lost, I think, when you do have folks working on brands for work's sake, like as you mentioned. How are you, in your lane trying to continue to push for creativity's seat at the table in serving this, immensely important role of capturing meaningful attention?
Yeah. Well, I think, it's funny. You didn't want to wear a suit. I didn't want to wear a suit either, but I thought I had to. I was like, oh, this is work. I've got to do it. So I've got to do this. And you're right. It's kind of it was a slow process if you don't come from a creative world to kind of find all these different opportunities. And even going into production, I was like, oh wow, these jobs exist. You can be, you can be on a boom. You can be you can be an editor. If I'd have been there's a chance I would have been, gone into editing if I knew about it, because I love that part of the post production. It does require discipline. It really does. And it's tough. We had a client recently who I really wanted to have at the flower shop, really wanted to have them. It's a big client. And they came to us and said, look, we want to say this, that, and the next thing. We want to pile all this stuff into an ad. And I was like, okay, well, let's try. And I tried to do it for a couple of weeks. And I was trying to write a commercial that had 3 or 4 different things they wanted to say. I had a voiceover, I had product, and it just didn't work. And I was like, this isn't, I know you want to say this, but people can't hear it. People do not have the ability. No one likes watching ads. You have to kind of get into where they're at and meet them on their own terms and do it with something that's simple and engaging. And I was just trying to make it work for the client, and it just didn't work. And so, I gave myself a bit of a talking to and was like, look, we have to just remember that if you want to do something compelling, if you want to make a good piece of work, you can't say too much. You can't say the same things that everyone else is saying. You have to come at this with a different angle. It has to be truthful to the brand. It has to be authentic, but it cannot be 10 things. I know you want to say everything. I know you want people to know everything about your brand, but we're in a position now, I think, where it's tough. People want everyone to know about their brand. It's very competitive, but as a veteran creative, it's our job to really help clients understand what works, what doesn't work, find clients that want to do good work. That's a big challenge. And that's something that they're out there. There's so many clients. We got great clients at Fanatics. that we work with and being that really believe that if they do distinctive advertising, they will stand out. And so it's our kind of duty to help them in this kind of crazy world, like be really focused, be really simple, and create work that's really differentiated. And that's all that we do at the Flower Shop. We have this kind of little motto, which is we create work that people love, normal people actually love, not like we're not just saying they love it. People that actually seek out, watch once, watch twice, share it, talk about it. We want to create that work, but that work has to benefit the brand too. So it has to be two things. It's work that benefits the brand and work that people love. And if you do that, if you do both those things, I think you get really great creative. And if you only do one of them, it doesn't work. And I don't want to be in a place where I want to be doing work that it meets those two things. I don't want to do work that adds to the landfill, the 99.9% of advertising that no one watches. I'm not interested in that. And I don't think that it's smart for us to give clients that. It's not fair. It's their money. And so I have a duty to kind of make sure that everything we do is, for me, conceptually driven and distinctive and simple to get and works for the people that are watching it and the brand that are paying for it.
So if you were to give advice to any junior creative or honestly, even like mid-level or higher level creative who's never experienced a client situation, like you've mentioned, where they truly have bought into the idea of, not even the idea, bought into the like empirical importance of distinctive and exciting advertising as a route towards building a brand,
Mm-hmm.
how would you give them advice in, seeking out places where they can go and get those opportunities, or what can they be looking for in teams who like to work with them? Because that's something that's so cool about going out and building your own shop in the Flower Shop, is that you guys kind of get to, say no and say yes and figure out those scenarios. But for someone who's coming up or has kind of been in the industry for a little bit, what can they do to move inch closer to those scenarios?
Yeah. I think it comes back to this, like, I don't know, was it old Arthur Ashe quote, like, take what you have, do what you can. And I can't remember the last part of it, but it's like, it's definitely that. I think people like, I don't know, you had Jerry Graff on a while ago, and I think that Jerry Graff and I think he said this before, and I agree with it wholeheartedly. Like, if you have a client that wants to see their product in the first 5 seconds, if you have a client that is demanding that it's on screen for 20 seconds, if you feel like you're in this real constraints and this is not going to lead to creative advertising, like, lead with all that stuff. Like, I'm not saying make fun of it, but like, just put it front and center and see what you can do with it. See whether you can have fun with it around the edges. A lot of their work, if you look at kind of the BFG stuff and Eric and Carlman, a lot of that work is really hardcore product advertising. And so if somebody gets a brief and they don't like it and it doesn't look like there's an opportunity, start with all the bad stuff and see if you can turn that into something through interesting dialogue, through what happens after the first 5 seconds, and see if there is any opportunity in that. You haven't lost anything by trying. And I would try, never just serve up what they want. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. But you don't want to be on set making something that's terrible. And so I would just, really, like, do what you have with what you've got and see if there's any way. And there usually is. And I would look at some of that, like, particularly like the old D&AD stuff where there's like really heavy product advertising. There's just little ways you can find of getting away with a bit of humor. I mean, I say getting away with it. It's what people want. So, I think, and again, like, clients can't help but like stuff that is funny or is entertaining or is, they're just human too. So as long as they get what they want, you can try to make it kind of palatable for someone who's watching and for yourself who's writing it or art directing it or whatever.
So in that point and looking at how you've gotten towards where you are now and having, to your point, come out with a non-traditional book, you've built a non-traditional agency. Honestly, the idea of traditional versus non-traditional advertising has become a super grayed out concept with the digital world that we live in now. You went from BBH to Widen to TBWA in the US to then like build your own shop. What is the like inflection point that's brought you to create Flowershop and to build work that people love and benefits brands too?
I think really, there's part of me that's like constantly trying to recreate 2000 at TBWA on that third floor, where there was a real joy of making that work, and it was kind of easy. It seemed easy, you would have a brief, you would go to the third floor, and you would come back a week later and just sit in amazement at some of these ideas and some of the thinking that was presented in front of you on like drawn scamp bit of paper. There was nowhere to hide. It was just a line and a drawing, or it was just a script that was read out to you, and that was the essence of it. And it felt like when I was kind of coming up, Chris and John were really amazing creatives, but really good mentors. And they said to us, they were like, look, when you come up with a portfolio, don't come up with like the executions. I don't want to see the executions. All I want to see is the line. All I want to see is like a strategic creative line. So if it was like for Madame Tussauds, I think the line that they like was like Stalker's Paradise. If you're a stalker, Madame Tussauds is often. If you're Kawasaki was like have a cool death. Those kind of like dangerous motorbikes. It was like Colgate toothpaste. The only thing that separates us from the animals. And it was like that simplicity of thought. And I talked, before about just it's what we do. Really, is just kind of reframe the way people think about it. I think that is what we're trying to do at Flowershop is get back to that simplicity. And it's not easy to get to those lines, but it is definitely a worthwhile journey to go on, to take all the research that you have, to take all the research the client has, to take what you know about the market, to take what's going on in culture and boil it down into a line for a brand that resonates, that people like. And that is, I loved being at TBWA. I loved the big age. I came up through big agencies, and as I've talked about, a lot of the people that are in my creative life were from 2000 at TBWA, but they're from Widen and they're from TBWA. Chris Beresford Hill was a great mentor to me at TBWA when I was like, very experienced. And he's at a big agency now, and I don't knock big agencies. I think big agencies can be brilliant, and he'll do brilliant things as he did at Ogilvy. He's one of the most creative people I've ever met. We sit and have breakfast. He'll just throw ideas at me all breakfast. And I think that there are brilliant people in big agencies and small agencies. But what we're trying to do at the Flowershop is just focus on the act of the creation of the idea and show our worth through the thinking that we present to clients, and have find clients that want that kind of work. And I believe that there's tons of them, and there's tons of talent that as a young creative, I see books and I see ideas every day that I think are great, just as good as I saw in 2000. And I wanted to help people make those work because I think it will be good for them, and I think it'll be good for the industry to kind of show our worth through our work, not through any kind of thought leadership pieces or talking, or just like getting down and showing that good ideas still exist and they can make a difference. So that's what we're trying to do, just really simply.
Yeah, it's super exciting, and even in conversations with you on the side too, and knowing that we have this shared, you know, goal and belief in bringing in young, eager talent, chomping at the bit to flex their creative abilities, their creative muscles. That to your point, like are they coming up in a totally different generation? Sure. But with every ability to create something just as simple as those lines that
Yeah.
you use as examples for Kawasaki that still punch you in the gut.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's stuff that punches you in the gut and stuff you're like, oh, it's just that visceral reaction. That I still have that. I still love that when I see that. And I think that for people coming in, they get to do that every day. They get to like use their imagination. It's an amazing job. It's an amazing industry that we get to do that. And you get to just sit and stare out the window and dream up anything you want. You can write anything down. It's not wrong. It's just like if you think it and you have it and you put it in a way that is compelling, that I think that's really just a wonderful like opportunity to have. And I think that I know that there's like, you don't spend too much time on LinkedIn, but if you do, you read the doom and gloom and advertising's dead and all this nonsense. And I just like, it's not, it is not. Their clients are demanding work. They're demanding like to be different. There's competition has never been fiercer. And I think the ability for us as creative thinkers has never been more important, actually. And so I think I love this industry, and I think it's a great industry for people to come into, and as you said, kind of flex their creativity and imagination and get paid for it and help brands that they believe in, help causes and help brands and back products that they like.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up too, that like the advertising business media loves to say that shit about advertising. And sure, are there maybe like little nuggets of truth in that? Like, yeah, is there a ton of creative out there that's punching people in the gut? I don't know. Is there more that's just, pushing products and getting it in people's face? It kind of feels like that to me. And if that is the truth, then that's all the more reason to get more imaginative and get more excited about what you do. Like almost a challenge that we can, from this pod to you, to listener, to every time you're seeing ads that are not punching people in the gut and cluttering up, the space for all of these brands who are competing, use that as fuel to go out and come up with the next one that's going to shine outside of all those.
Yeah. If you think advertising is bad, make it better. And it is, and there's an opportunity in there. I think you're right. It's like we can either bemoan it or we can make it better. And we're trying to do the latter. And I think that we need the next generation of talent to come in with that energy and that like optimism that it can be done. I don't want people coming into advertising thinking that it's a dying industry. It's not. It's just nonsense. That's just people with, big voices, who, the next day will probably come and say how they're going to save it. So I would just like, that to me is like a wasted energy. And I don't think we should be airing our dirty laundry in public. I think we should just be getting on with making work that, we enjoy making and works for the client. And I think that's like undeniable. Like you said, the gut punch, it's like, you see stuff, and you can't deny that it like hits you and that it makes a difference and it makes an impact. And I like that. And I love that, that old George Lewis used to say that, a TV ad should feel like a hand coming out of the TV, like grabbing you by the throat and holding you there for 30 seconds. And like, if it doesn't do that, it's not effective. And that's everything that he tried to do, was like that kind of impact. And you see, work that does it. You've seen work that does it. There's still work that does it all the time. And so that's the benchmark, and that's what we should be going for. And there's always been crap advertising. Majority of advertising has always been terrible. But we're not part of that. We're trying to make the good stuff.
You're definitely not a part of that. And to all of these points, something that I think is really cool with with what you and Flowershop are doing is you're putting your money where your mouth is in the work. And as far as like bringing, new and excited talent to the industry. So, Al, I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about the book critique event that you guys are going to be having at the Flowershop some weekend coming up here in the future. Listeners, keep your eyes peeled, your ears open for when they're going to be hosting this event at the Flowershop in New York. And Al, I'll let you get into the details.
Yes, we're going to have open hours at the Flowershop on 5 Rivington Street in the Bowery, New York City. And I invite anybody to come. We'll have a kind of sign up, and we'll have a flyer and all that kind of good stuff. But I would love anybody to come with their book, with ideas, with anything that they would like a kind of creative opinion on. And we will do 15-minute kind of portfolio reviews, book crits, chats, whatever you want to come in and try to, glean any kind of advice or some, tips on your book, or like crafting an idea. And I've enlisted a couple of other creatives. Ricard Valero, who's was ECD with me at TWA and then ECD at Mullen, is just an insane creative, an unbelievable creative director as well. So I think that anybody coming in will get just such valuable kind of advice from him. He did our logo and our Viz ID, but one of the best creative directors I got the chance to work with him, and I would always just sit back and listen to him give feedback to teams, and I would just sit there, nod my head, and go, yeah, what he said. And then I'm trying to get my good friend Scott Dungate, who's the ECD Leiden in New York and in Tokyo. He's going to come and help too. So there'll be 3 or maybe 4 of us giving book crits, and I just want anyone who's got the guts to come to New York without a job or without like real stable, which I did in London, a kind of, anyone who's taken that leap to come and wants to try and get into advertising or wants to get some advice, I would definitely encourage anybody to come in and see us. And there'll be pastries and coffees. So if you don't like the reviews, at least the food and the drink will be good. But yeah, I'm just trying to do these kind of things. I'm from the UK, so I don't have like a great lead into that, and I didn't go to ad school, so I don't have that kind of relationship. So I thought, like, just be democratic. I mean, anyone who wants to come in, whether they've been to portfolio school or not, I obviously, as you can imagine, I don't care about that. Great if you have, and kudos to you for doing that. But you definitely don't have to. And this will be the first one.
It's so cool what you're doing, and half the battle for anyone listening is showing up and accepting the challenge. And for those who are trying on your own or have been doing it, the hardest part is being able to like put your true self and imagination down on paper into the work. And that's the same here. Like, take this opportunity, go talk to Al and the rest of the creative folks that are going to be there. Cause the worst that can happen, like you said, is you leave with a tasty croissant and a coffee.
That's right.
And have gotten feedback that you wouldn't have gotten feedback on your own, or that's at the very least like unique and different from the experience that you have right now. And for a major problem and folks always hear is that they're reaching out and they're trying to network and they don't hear anything. And that's because a lot of advertisers and marketers, all of them are fucking busy, and it's hard, and a lot want to give back and simply like can't always. And I think it's so cool that you guys are inviting folks into the Flowershop. Thanks again for sharing your story, Al, and talking about the industry with us and putting your money where your mouth is and pushing to help other folks get in. And excited to hear about the turnout.
Yeah, that's great. And if anyone can't make it, I know everyone can't get to New York. We could figure out a way of helping and doing crits. So I'm happy to jump on a call and look at someone's book. And I would just mention my partner, Mary Lou Bunn, as well. I'm going to enlist her. She is just a brilliant business brain. And it might be interesting to people to come and to also kind of get some advice about, companies and organizations and who to join and how does it work. And she's just got amazing insight on how the actual business side of advertising work. So if that is of interest to people too, I know that, with this changing landscape, that it must be of interest, and it is a kind of curious transition period to some extent in advertising. So whilst I focus on the work, Mary Lou and Bill Afonso, who's a partner of ours too, is they're brilliant about the business side and the outlook of advertising. So they might be useful resources too on that day.
Right on. Well, thanks again, Al, for taking the time. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your story, and for what you're doing out in the world to back it up. It's what matters. We all get by with a little help from our friends. We'll leave you with a Beatles quote, but thanks, Al.
That's great. Thanks very much for having me, Cooper. I really enjoyed it.